it all in one breath.
Okay. Hi guys. So I'm just going to preface this by saying Scientology is not a religion, it is a cult. The other thing that I will preface this with is I know this is going on the internet, and Scientologists like to track down people and hurt people who actively go against Scientology. So throughout my research, I was using a VPN, and there is a moderate potential of a Scientologist to find this and then for me to get reported. So hopefully, Lord willing, that does not happen. So without further ado, welcome to the Church of Scientology. Or, as I like to call it, How Not to Be an Occult 101. So this picture on the left was actually taken in 2019 before COVID. My mom and I went to Los Angeles, and this is on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And she got so excited that I liked learning about Scientology, she wanted me to get a picture in front of the building. And so the reason why I looked super freaked out is because I was thoroughly convinced that somebody was going to kidnap me while she was taking the picture, or hand us a pamphlet, try to talk to us about Scientology, and somebody actually did. And I looked at the guy, looked at my mom, and said, hey, let's rip up the pamphlet and throw it away. So, yeah, great. My only experience with an actual Scientologist. The reason why I chose Scientology was actually because 2 years ago, Rachel Swain and another alumni, John Lyons, were here one night, and I walked in the building, and they were watching this series, and it just seemed absolutely insane. Like, they were talking about people who committed suicide, they were in this religion thing, and so I sat down and watched it, and we had a huge discussion about it, and ever since then I've been watching that series, and I've just been really interested in how weird this cult actually is. So a little bit of history. In 1911, L. Ron Hubbard, who is this guy right here, was born, and he actually started out as a science fiction writer. But he soon got bored of it and said, writing for a penny a word is ridiculous. If a man really wanted to make $1 million, the best way would be to start his own religion. And so in 1950 he did. He wrote Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health, and it quickly gained traction in the media, and he wanted it to grow bigger. So in 1954 he established the Church of Scientology of California, which was the first Church of Scientology. And then in the 1960s, he decided that he wanted Scientology to stay in the media, so he opened the first celebrity center in Hollywood, with other ones to follow in Nashville, New York, etc., for celebrities to promote Scientology for free. In 1966, Hubbard produced the first clear, and I'll explain a little bit about what going clear means in a couple slides. And then in 1986, Hubbard left his body behind. He died of a heart attack. But in the Church of Scientology, they do not believe that Hubbard actually died. They believe that his work was so amazing that in order to complete it, he had to actually leave his physical body behind. But he died. We have medical records of that. And David Miscavige, which is this man right here, took over the organization. And fun fact, which I learned after I finished writing my paper, David Miscavige was never actually appointed by L. Ron Hubbard, in writing. So we don't know if he actually ever was the official new leader of Scientology or if he just took it over because he saw the opportunity. And then in 1993, Scientology received tax exemption status, which really doesn't seem important, but Scientology is awful. And when the IRS denied them tax exemption status for decades, and they considered it a war against humanity. And when they finally got their tax exemption status, they were like, oh my gosh, the war's over, we can save the planet by doing this. Basically, it just meant that America finally recognized them as a religion. Now, going into where people recognize Scientology as a religion, you can see that everywhere in green are countries that recognize Scientology as a religion, and the majority of Scientologists reside in the United States and Australia. Ooh. Also, what's interesting to me with this graph is that Germany and Chile actually consider Scientology a cult, through the government, which is pretty cool. So if you want to absolutely ditch Scientology, go to those two countries. Scientology is based in 3 main locations in the United States. There is LA, which is known as the official headquarters of Scientology. There is the flag base in Clearwater, Florida, which is the spiritual headquarters of Scientology. And then there is the gold base, which I will get into more detail about a little bit later. But Scientologists who are active in the church only know it as where all of the media productions are taking place, but there is actually more to it that the high-ranking officials do not tell people. So some famous Scientologists are Tom Cruise with his lovely tooth in the middle of his face, John Travolta, Kirstie Alley, and then the most famous former Scientologist is Leah Remini, who is spearheading the movement to get people out of Scientology, to get Scientology out of tax exemption status. And she is actually a huge influence to my presentation because she was the one that started the docuseries that I was watching that night. And she is how I got most of my research, because a lot of Scientologists don't like people who are not in the church to know what they believe. So she exposed pretty much everything. Now into their actual beliefs, sort of. So their idea of salvation, the ultimate goal of Scientology, is true spiritual enlightenment and freedom for the individual. And they do this by going clear. So Hubbard told his believers that you are not your own person. There is actually a Thetan, which is never defined, living inside you for a time. The Thetan has two parts to their mind. There is the analytical mind, which is like the good part of the mind. It remembers every single thing that's ever happened in your life. It's very loyal, it's very factual, it's a good part of the brain. And then there's the reactive part of the mind, which is where all of the traumas are stored throughout a Thetan's lifetime, or multiple lifetimes in this case. And every time a new trauma is brought into the Thetan's world, it creates an engram, which is just like a recording of the trauma. And it triggers the reactive mind to cause people to sin. And so the way to go clear is to eliminate the trauma by using Dianetic therapy, which is called auditing, which I'll explain on the next slide. Basically, Hubbard describes a clear as free from active or potential psychosomatic illness or aberration, able to perceive, recall, imagine, create, and compute at a level high above the norm, freer from accidents, and healthier. And the way that Scientology loves to advertise is by saying, oh my gosh, because I'm like clear, I cured my own cancer. I've never gotten a cold. But there is record of Scientologists who have gone clear who have passed away from heart attacks, strokes, cancer, just like every other human being. So the concept of auditing is how people achieve salvation, which is very different from the Christian view of salvation. So in Scientology, salvation means being released from the cycle of birth and death, whereas salvation for Christians is believing that Jesus came to earth, born of a virgin, was fully God, fully human, lived a perfect life, died an innocent death on a cross, the worst death possible, and then defeated death and raised again. And if we believe that, we can have eternal life with God. Not the case in Scientology. They have to go through this process that is actually never ending. They use an e-meter, so you can see it right here. It is basically 2 electrodes. Fun fact, when Scientology was first introduced, they were actually Campbell's soup cans. And there is an e-meter right here, and so basically there's like a little floating needle right here, and the way that I like to describe it is if you're using like an older scale that has like the actual needle in it, it looks like that when you first step on it. And so the goal is to sit across from this person who's trained in auditing, and the auditor asks specifically worded questions that are designed to help and find engrams in the Thetan's life. And this could be in the current life that's in this body, or it could be a past life, because Scientologists believe that Thetans live forever. So they will go through this process until they go clear, until all those engrams seemingly disappear. Sorry. And then after going clear, they still continue the auditing process to ensure that all the traumas are gone. There is record of people who are accused of bestiality, of abuse that they never actually committed, because they will do anything to get out of these auditing sessions, even if they have nothing wrong in their lives. Because the auditing sessions can last up to 12.5 hours and cost thousands of dollars. And they have to go through multiples of these even just to go clear, and afterwards they just get more expensive and even longer. As I said before, Scientologists believe that Thetans live infinite lifetimes. So heaven and hell don't exist, and there's no purpose for them in the world of Scientology. Scientologists believe that people are immortal spiritual beings who have lived before and who will live again, and that their future happiness and immortality as spiritual beings depends on how they conduct themselves in the here and now. So they like to focus a lot on what's called clearing the planet. So to them, like, they want to get it done now. They want to give up everything so that their planet can be great for when their Thetan lives the next lifetime. So they really don't care about anything in this lifetime. So my question to anybody who's a Scientologist would be, why is anything in this life important? Why wouldn't you care about your kids? Why don't you care about your husband or wife? they will give up everything to pursue Scientology solely because they know that they believe that their thetans will live forever. So comparing to Christianity, I already talked a little bit about the idea of salvation, but I will also go into scriptures, leadership styles, and their view of God and Jesus. So we have the Bible in Christianity, and the Bible is written by multiple authors who were all inspired by God to write these books. And there are multiple accounts of similar events, or the same event, such as the resurrection, the birth of Jesus, the death of Jesus. We have 4 in the Gospels. But in Scientology, the only scripture they use is written by Hubbard. There is absolutely no accountability, and it is everything he's ever written. So it includes hundreds of books, hundreds of films, and more than 3,000 recorded lectures. The other thing to note is he also contradicts himself a lot, so a lot of the lectures at the beginning of his life don't match up with the ones at the end of his life. Then we move into leadership styles. So in Christianity, each denomination has their own level of autonomy. So for example, when Laura presented on the Presbyterian Church last semester, she talked about how eventually all the churches go to this hierarchy that's just one hierarchy that goes to one big group at the top. And Southern Baptist churches are very autonomous. They have their own leadership styles. They have the Southern Baptist Convention, but they have their own deacons and pastors. Scientology is not the same. It's actually very similar to the Presbyterian Church's style. It's a pyramid. So there is the member, the person who gets taken off the street because they're offering a free personality test. They start classes, they start auditing, maybe they go clear. Then there's a celebrity, who is somebody who is personally picked by the Church of Scientology. So John Travolta, Tom Cruise, who can be a face for Scientology. Then there is the Sea Org, which are people who are considered the clergy of Scientology, and they sign a billion-year contract to give up everything for the Church of Scientology. And then at the very top, there is Hubbard and Miscavige. And just like I said before, there is no accountability for the person at the top. They don't answer to anybody else. There's no group. It is just this one person making the decisions and telling everybody at the bottom, oh, this is what we now believe. And they just kind of follow it blindly. Their views of God and Jesus. So as Christians, Christians believe that God has always existed. He is the one and only true God. We believe that Jesus is the Son of God from Mark 15:39. We believe that Jesus died for our sins and rose again after 3 days, according to 1 Thessalonians 4:14 and Romans 8:34. And we believe in the Trinity, which is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, according to Matthew 28:19. We believe that they are all God, but they are all still separate beings. And it's kind of hard to describe it. There's no accurate metaphor for it. So if you guys have any questions about that, feel free to talk to somebody on leadership or staff. We would love to chat with you about that. In Scientology, it's not the same, and this is kind of where we see a lot of Hubbard's contradictions. So Hubbard describes a supreme being, but he says it's not the Christian God. In fact, he equivocates our Christian God to a Hindu God, which automatically doesn't make sense because if we believe that our God's the one true God, and Hindu's a polytheistic religion, that can't make sense. He also says that Jesus was just another moral leader. In fact, he believes that Scientologists who go clear are actually higher spiritually than Jesus himself. So now we're going to move into the biggest problems, and I think I've mentioned quite a few of them already. Don't worry, there are more. One of the biggest issues is, and the reason why I had so many issues researching for this project, is they hide beliefs from their own members. So I mentioned the Gold Base a little bit earlier, and while I said that the Gold Base was home to Golden Era Productions, it is actually also home to the high-ranking officials of Scientology. But they do not share that with their members until you're a high-ranking member yourself. It is nowhere on their website, and I dug deep for this thing. The only pictures that we have of the Gold Base are drone pictures that just happen to have gotten in. And the way that ex-members share about it is they have a barbed wire fence surrounding the base, but the barbed wires are like this. so nobody can get out or in. And they are very big on keeping everybody in. And I'll explain that one in a little bit too, because that's another big issue with the church. The other major belief that they hide from their members is OT level 3. So once you go clear, you have a bridge you need to go up. And there's OT level 1 through 8, which is operating Thetan, which means like this is like you are your own Thetan now, like you are above your own body, like you can do anything, you gain powers with each level you go up. OT level 3, you specifically have to be invited. You can't just choose to go to OT level 3 on your own. So Hubbard, when he first introduced OT level 3, told his followers, the material involved in this sector is so vicious that it is carefully arranged to kill anyone if he discovers the exact truth. I'm about to tell you the exact truth, so have fun with that. 75 million years ago, people lived, or the Thetans lived in worlds that were similar to the 1950s, 1960s. Plot twist, that's when Dianetics was released, when Hubbard started the cult, so take that as you will. A being named Xenu, which is not the supreme being, we don't know who Xenu is. He ruled the Galactic Confederacy, which he says was like 76 planets around a bunch of solar systems. Thetans were persecuted and were transported to Earth, and then the Earth was abandoned by the Galactic Confederacy. They said that the Thetans were dropped off by dropping them in volcanoes and blown up like hydrogen bombs, and they entered our bodies, and here we are. Hubbard never explains how he came to these conclusions. I'm trying so hard not to laugh right now, guys. I really am. Yeah. Leah Remini in her series actually explained how she went through this process. So apparently when you are invited to OT level 3, you have to be taken into a room. You're given a briefcase with this handwritten letter in it. This is written by Hubbard, by the way. You are handcuffed to the briefcase. No one's allowed in the room with you except for a parent, potentially. And you are not allowed to talk to anybody about what you believe. So Leah, when she was in the room, she had her mom in the room with her. Her mom could not see what was in the briefcase. Her mom could not talk to her while she was in the room with her. The only thing her mom could do was make facial expressions. And Leah was trying to talk to her saying, what is this? This doesn't make any sense. And she was just like, because her mom didn't believe it herself. But yet they were still stuck in Scientology, and they were so far into it, they couldn't get out at this point. And they purposely do it at OT level 3 because it's so insane, and you're so invested in the religion already, that you might as well just keep going after you find this out. Also talking about Leah Remini, she has spent 3 seasons of this show capturing the stories of former Scientologists, their families, and reporters, and I highly recommend watching it if you want to learn a lot more than I can tell you about Scientology. But many of these stories include multiple forms of abuse, including sexual, financial, physical abuse. I was talking about the gold base before. So high-ranking officials are trapped on the gold base, and when they escape, there are these things called blow drills, and the entire staff is trained to capture this person, regardless of what it takes. So they will contact airports. They will contact taxi services in the area. They will collect phone records on this person. They will track letters sent to and from this person, solely to find where they went, bring them back, and put them in a double-wide trailer called the Hole. Scientology denies that this place ever existed. It definitely does. Another story is that children of the Sea Org members are abandoned because, once again, their parents don't care about them, so they're raised by Scientology because their parents are so focused on clearing the planet that they can't parent their own children. If Sea Org members get pregnant, they are forced to have abortions. Scientology once again denies that ever happened. There are multiple accounts of it happening. There are stories of sexual abuse of children in the Sea Organization and how Scientologists will blame the children because it's their sin that caused it. It's their reactive mind that caused the sin to happen. And the biggest one that Leah Remini talks about is how David Miscavige physically assaulted Sea Org members at meetings for the littlest things. If they said one word wrong, if they sneezed, like any little thing could set David off. And I don't remember who asked me this, but it was a friend of mine, and he asked me, do I believe that all of these things happened? And it took me a while to think about the answer, and I have to say the answer is yes. Only because there are so many ex-members of the church that were at the gold base that witnessed all these things, and that are still to this day, decades later, saying that they happened. And not only that, but multiple members are corroborating the same stories, where the Church of Scientology is just flat out denying that any of this happened, when they contradict their own beliefs all the time. So why would I believe an organization that can't even tell the truth to their own members, that hides things from people, hides things from the public, when there are tens of people that are telling these horrific stories of abuse and blow drills and all this sort of stuff? Like, it boggles my mind, like, why this would ever happen. And I have no choice but to believe them. And this is kind of a form of abuse, but I wanted to touch on this specifically. The concept of disconnection, once again, the Scientology claims this practice was discontinued. On their website, they say that it never happened. That is an outright lie. Anybody who is considered a suppressive person, so anybody who stands in the way of a Thetan's spiritual progress, whether it's a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, a cousin, a neighbor, a co-worker, a reporter, me, anyone who denounces Scientology is considered a suppressive person by the Church of Scientology. And as I said in the beginning of my presentation, they are subject to being exploited. People in the Church of Scientology will stalk these suppressive people. They will try to find any little thing to nitpick at for them. They will make up outright lies about celebrities like Leah Remini and post them everywhere so that people will believe them. If you post something on Facebook, do you know if it's clickbait? I don't know. Yeah. The Church of Scientology is weird. Anyway, disconnection. It has separated thousands of families, broken them completely apart. The co-host of the Leah Remini show, his name is Mike Rinder. He actually has 3 children who are still in the church, and he has not had connection with them for over 15 years. So it's just really depressing because he hasn't been able to see if he has any grandchildren, he hasn't been able to celebrate birthdays with them or anything like that. So, in conclusion, I'll be honest, I don't understand what they believe. But it breaks my heart for the people who are trapped or who've been affected by Scientology. I want to reach out to every single person and help them understand who Jesus is and that there is a God who loves them. Because it just blows my mind that somebody could be so vulnerable to fall for this. Yeah. Scientology, everybody. It's been wonderful presenting to you. I'm ready for questions now. Oh gosh!
I have a lot, so you can wait.
Okay, who goes Zimba?
You're looking at me?
Yeah, I said Sam, Zimba.
Okay, so Christians believe that God knows each and every one of us personally even before we're born. So he knows exactly how many of us there are in the end because he's omnipotent.
Mm-hmm.
So Chancellor Zoo, or whatever this guy is, what was the spaceman in his
Xenu?
confederation? Xenu.
Xenu, yeah.
And his confederation of space people. They bombed Earth with the Thetans, they say, correct?
Yes, with hydrogen bombs.
And left them in volcanoes and things. Does that mean there's a finite number of Thetans? Or because you're saying they're being rebirthed, but at the same time, the human population has only increased since the beginning.
Okay, so remember the fact where I didn't understand what they were talking about with this whole thing?
So are they stored in volcanoes?
I'm just going to put that out there.
bastards?
OT level 3 is so confusing to me. I really didn't want to get into more research than I had on my screen. From what I could comprehend, I believe the hydrogen bombs were meant to split the Thetans into millions. So some Scientologists believe that there are multiple Thetans within a person. Some people believe there's only one. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention this in my presentation. Yeah, I contacted a Church of Scientology in Columbus, Ohio, and instead of answering my direct questions about their concept of salvation, etc., they told me to read a book, which is what they tell every single member. They do not actually teach anything. They just say, figure it out for yourself. So they don't, even their own members don't actually know what they believe, even after they reach OT3. So I really don't know. Yes, Carolyn.
What does the L and O Ron Hubbard stand for?
Lafayette.
Really?
Yeah, it does. It really does. I forgot I knew that. Thank you.
That's a fun little, okay. All right. Okay, so.
Aaron's like, I'm not even gonna try.
I have a lot of questions too.
Oh, go for it. I can do my
The
best.
first one is just, what's the founder's name?
L. Ron Hubbard. Lafayette Ron Hubbard.
Did he have some sort of enlightenment, or
No.
like, how did he figure
He
all this
literally,
stuff out?
he literally got bored of writing science fiction
Okay.
and said, hey, let's just roll with it.
So then my follow-up question is, how the heck did it gain traction?
It was,
You mean the movie based on
Yeah,
go for it.
what you're talking about during the time, this is like in the 50s and 60s, this is when like Jim Jones is going around and doing these healings, like miraculous healings. L. Ron Hubbard was doing something similar with the e-meters. So people were getting psychiatric help and people were watching this, like the auditing happen. And what happens at first when you go to the audits is it's like you leave and you just kind of feel refreshed because you're able to get out like a lot of the like like not residual but like, you know, like surface trauma. So like getting that out is really like, it is therapeutic. So people are seeing these things, and that's why it started gaining traction, is because suddenly people are seeing people being healed psychiatrically.
Okay.
Carolyn, I'll get to you. Casey, go ahead.
So, and like one of your earlier slides when you had like the map, you said there's a couple countries that like allow marriages within the Church of Scientology, but like what is the point if the goal is to be like clear or whatever, what's the point of like a relationship?
There isn't
anything
one.
like that.
There isn't one because they have no concept of like repopulating the earth. Like kind of like how like our mission as Christians is to like go and make disciples. They don't have that. So I don't actually know, but people do get married like in the church. There are tons of stories about it. It's not like if you're in the Sea Org as a clergy member, which is where you do actually like go out and like talk to people on the street. One of the rules is like try not to get married. They don't actually say don't, but they're like, you probably shouldn't do that. Yes, Laura.
Can you talk a little bit about, you said financial abuse that goes on in the church? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so those 12 and a half hours of auditing can cost you upwards of like $10,000. And the way that as you go up the OT levels, the classes get more and more expensive. So as you're in a pre-clear stage, so you're just starting out with a personality test. That personality test is free, by the way. They're online if you're really interested. Please don't do it. After you take the personality test, they'll recommend you buy Dianetics. Dianetics with the whole set is like a couple $100. The first classes you take, a couple $100. As you're moving up the levels, they increasingly get more expensive. And so I think Leah Remini paid upwards of like $2.5 million in her time at the church. And she was also paying for her families to go up the bridge, her family members to go up the bridge, friends who couldn't afford it. Other people who can't afford it that don't have a rich friend to get money from, they will max out credit cards. They actually have financial advisors that will tell them which credit cards to get so that they can continue to pay for Scientology. And if you join the Sea Org, you get all of your classes paid for until you leave. And then you're given like a bazillion-dollar contract or a bazillion-dollar bill that you have to pay off before you die. Yes, Aaron.
So, how many levels, or like, what do you have to do to be recognized by by the Church of Scientology as a Scientologist?
That's a great question. I actually don't know the answer to that. There's no like, I know in order to officially become a Scientologist, you have to join like this like it's required that you join like this foundation, and there's about 300,000 people in that foundation. And that's like when you first become clear. That's the thing, like one of the contracts you have to sign is to join that organization.
So could you consider yourself a Scientologist before you do that, if you're just investigating?
There are other celebrities who are not on that list that have taken Scientology classes and would identify as Scientologists solely because they've taken those classes in that auditing session. Others would not, so it really just depends. There's so many. Nettie, yeah, sorry.
So what specifically is their marketing strategy to celebrities? Is it the therapy?
It's a mix of the therapy and just like treating them super well. So with John Travolta specifically, they would like take him out to nice dinners, and they like, David Miscavige was the one initiating everything. Like they would take the head of Scientology and put them like in his path every single way they could. He would go on to movie sets. They would purposely hire like sound guys that were Scientologists and chefs that were Scientologists, any way to get Scientology in his brain, and then be like, hey, you want to meet this guy? He's pretty cool. They treat them like royalty. Like they don't know that any of this goes on. They have no idea.
Wait.
Okay. When you think of it.
Okay,
Oh,
so,
you have a list.
I do, I took notes. So with, like, creation, we talked about, like, how, like, people got to Earth or whatever, but did they believe in, like, a set start time, like, when creation began?
4 quadrillion years ago.
But, like, who did that, and how and why? No? Okay. And then do they believe that there will be, like, a specific end point?
No, because they believe they'll live infinite lifetimes. So they don't. They're just like, oh, we just want to get the planet clear for the next generation. Yes, Casey.
Okay, so is there like what types of pressures to like keep moving up in the levels and like keep taking classes? Because couldn't you like theoretically like take a class and be like, all right, but like what types of?
In theory, yes, but if you have a family member who's like up higher, the threat of disconnection actually is one of the big things that keeps them going even if they don't want to, which is why sometimes in those auditing sessions they'll say anything to get out of those auditing sessions. Once, like I said with OT level 3, once they're there, they might as well keep going because they're just too far in. They don't have any other option. There's no way out. Well, a few ways out at that point.
So with reincarnation, do they have to, engrams are like the bad things, right? Do they have to clear engrams from like past lifetimes?
Yes, they
as well?
do.
Okay.
Yes, they do, and that was not in the original belief system of the church. L. Ron Hubbard introduced it later, about 20 years after Dianetics was released. He said, oh, wait a second, there's more. Yup.
So, how did Leah get out?
That's another great question that I'm sure I know the answer to, but I've watched so much of it, I actually don't remember. I think with her, because she was a public figure, they just kind of let her leave, but she got a lot of backlash with all of those, like, the gossip sites and the tabloids. They would, like, Scientology would, like, creep in on her. Even now to this day, she still has private investigators following her pretty much everywhere she goes. So she's not, like, she's out of the church completely, but she's still getting tracked by them. Yes, Karen.
Okay, so, sorry, with us, like, we have Jesus as, like, Jesus is the way to salvation, and before Jesus, we had the Old Testament law, which was, like, be righteous, follow God, and all that. So, like, what do they believe was their, like, way to, like, achieve salvation or, like, go clear or whatever before the 50s? Like, in 1940, how could you be saved? You can't.
They also have a calendar that's specifically only for Scientology. I just remembered this. And so I don't think they believe that anybody could go clear before then. Like they just didn't have they're like, oh, Hubbard discovered this process. He's the only one that knows about it. Like we've got to follow him. And so after that, people could go clear. Yes, Samuel.
So you said that there's no like description, no evidence as to how Hubbard came across this revelation. Is there any beliefs within the like cult of Scientology of like if he was a prophet, if he had visions or dreams, if he scientifically discovered this process? Like even if they don't describe it, do they have any beliefs on how it came about?
I don't want to like butcher this, but I'm pretty sure they're just like, oh, he just discovered it. He was just like thinking one day and it just like came to him. Just thinking.
Yeah.
Jenna? Oh wait, Laura, did you have something to say on that?
Yeah, they also believe that he was like a World War II hero, even though he got injured and sent home early.
Dishonorably discharged, by the way.
And
A hero.
like they believe that he went blind. He claims that he went blind when he was out at sea because he was in the Navy.
That never happened.
And he didn't, but he claims that like this cured his blindness. So yes, they believe that he was the first to discover it in a way, like that. Just like he was able to cure his own blindness, and now he's going to share it with the world.
He was just like, eh.
And now slightly off topic, is that why he constantly wears like naval uniforms? And
Yes.
all
So the Sea Org's actually based off of his time in the Navy. It actually does not take place on a ship anymore, but it used to take place like solely on a ship because no country would let them in. So they chose a ship in order to stay in international waters. Man, Scientology's great, guys. Jenna.
This is probably a dumb question, but like, how did it get its name Scientology? Science.
Do you know?
I mean, it's a mix. It's said to be like a mixture of science and religion. So because he's a science fiction writer, yeah.
Oh yeah, that would make sense then, wouldn't it? Carolyn.
So, I think I just missed this, but like, the Sea Org, are they like one of the levels?
Yeah, they're the third level. So they're the clergy members. They're like the equivalent of like pastors and deacons
Okay.
in a Christian church. Not the equivalent, but if we're relating to the church, that would be it.
Okay. And if the people can't, like afford to pay or whatever, like before then, and they can't get like credit cards or whatever, what do they do? Is it just like, no, you're out?
They
or-
try to get somebody to pay for them.
Okay.
And there are plenty of people who will. It's,
Oh.
mhm.
Like within the church? Or,
Mhm.
okay.
Yes, Zach.
So like, what's like the basis for their moral standards, and how flexible are they on Ponzi schemes?
Well, considering the whole thing is pretty much a Ponzi scheme, I don't know. I would say they're pretty flexible on that. It's hard to tell where their moral standards are because, like, to the public, they're like, oh, we're these environmentally friendly people, like, we're trying to save the world. But then they have all of these issues that happen within.
Do they have a book on it?
No, they don't say anything about these things. That's why I'm presenting on it. Yes, Aaron.
Do they have any sort of like
I'm sorry.
prayers that they recite, or holidays, or traditions, or anything like
Their holidays are L. Ron Hubbard's birthday, his death.
that?
That's about it. They claim they go to church service every Sunday. Their buildings are basically empty every Sunday and every other day of the week. They are required to go to 4 events a year, like 4 major events, and 2 of them are L. Ron Hubbard's birthday and his death, like remembrance of him. I don't know what the other 2 are, but that's pretty much all I know about those. Yes, Casey.
That quote that was like really early on about like if a man wanted to make money, he would make his own religion. Like, where is that from, and how soon was that before he rolled out his convenient new religion?
I don't know where that's from, but it's from L. Ron Hubbard directly.
Okay.
It had to have been it had to have been after he wrote Dianetics. I'm not sure when though. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure I could find it really quickly though. I have many places where that's quoted. Yes, Aaron.
Do you know how much money he ended up making?
So much. Plot twist, they're not a nonprofit.
Yeah.
They're actually not a nonprofit.
How did they get the tax
They're-
exemption?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Exactly. They buy real estate,
Yeah.
which is why their buildings are empty. They just buy a bunch of real estate. So the city of Clearwater, where the spiritual headquarters is, people who are actually like locals of Clearwater refuse to go downtown because like 90% of the downtown area is just Scientology buildings. Like they cannot walk down the street without being accosted by somebody.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Zach.
So if they're just buying up land with all this money, like, if you join the church, like, do you get into this land, or like, who
No.
owns it? Like,
The
an
church,
individual,
David
or-
Miscavige, the church. Yeah, the church
L.
itself.
Ron Hubbard.
Yeah, L. Ron Hubbard from the
The top
grave.
guy owns all the land.
What's up?
The top guy owns all the land?
Yeah, Miscavige. Yes.
You gotta get up there.
Yeah. I'm looking towards myself. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, alright. So I know in Mormonism, when people have doubts, they'll be like, oh, like just believe, or like it'll be revealed to you, or that type of thing. Did they say like the same thing? Because they don't really like have beliefs that they know of. So they can't be like, oh, just believe, because they don't know what they believe. What do they say about it?
Yeah, so if they have,
No.
okay, so if they have any doubts, they're like, oh, that's probably an in-ground, like you need to get audited.
Oh, okay. Alright.
Yeah, and there's also the belief that like if you find out something that is above your OT level, like you will die. Like there's the reason why a lot of people that reach the level that they learn about Xenu and they don't tell people about it is because they believe like if I knew about Xenu and I told you, you would get cancer. Like the knowledge is so powerful that it was just it would kill you.
I told you I was going to tell you guys the truth. Sorry. That's fucking his ears. Yes, Ben?
So you said evil was An engram?
Yeah, anything traumatic, any abuse, anything evil would be considered an engram.
Is that the same thing as an enneagram?
No, that is completely different, and I would love to get into that, but that has nothing to do with
I know there's 9
Scientology.
levels for that.
Jenna.
So, like, they claim, like, you know, they're going clear and, like, they don't care about anything on Earth. So why did they make you pay for all these things?
I don't know, because they gotta make money somehow, right?
That's probably how they're probably using that money to pay for all the real estate.
Yeah. Yeah.
To expand their fake limits.
Go ahead.
So now that you have told us all this, what level are we at?
You guys are dead right now. I'm past that point, guys. It's too late for me.
Already on the
Yes.
Can you talk about like the concept of the hole again?
Yeah, so the hole is a double wide trailer that was originally supposed to be for, see, now that I'm not presenting, I'm super casual about this. Like, now I love talking about it. It is a double wide trailer that was originally supposed to be the offices for the high-ranking officials. But instead, whenever David Miscavige would get angry with somebody, he would just put them in the hole. And the windows were taken out, like they were like boarded up and everything. They're not given food for days at a time. It's a double wide trailer, so it's like relatively large. I wish I had a picture of it. It's relatively large, but it's still teeny in the grand scheme of things. They had over 100 people in there, according to a couple accounts. And they got to do such hard labor as licking the floor to make sure it was clean and cleaning the toilet with a toothbrush.
So how is that legal?
How is that legal?
So-
Because no one knows what's happening.
Yeah.
Well, we know what's happening.
But what would happen is, because the people that are in the hole want to stay in Scientology, like they believe that they're in the hole for their sins.
Mhm.
So even if the police went there and are like, we've heard this abuse is happening, oh my gosh, like, you know, can you tell us about it? They'd be like, oh no, nothing's happening here. We're fine. I'm happy. Like, I chose to be here.
Well, even that in Los Angeles, a lot of Scientologists have paid off the police to like not do anything about Scientology.
Yeah.
Yes, Laura.
Can you also talk about a little bit more about the importance of their tax exemption status?
Their tax exemption status. Oh gosh, I forgot what I talked about with you because I know I talked about this before.
Because they're tax exempt because like they're considered a religion, right?
Yeah, because they're considered a religion, so it gives them the freedom to do all these lovely things, to be able to practice freely, I guess. Like that's their big thing. So they are able to get away with a lot of these abuses because, oh, we're recognized as a religion. Like people in the government respect us. You can't do anything about it. There's probably more, but I generally just like spaced on everything.
I mean, they also had like a lot of debt accrued because they didn't pay taxes on
That
anything.
too. Guys, there's so much. Like, Casey.
So with like the engrams being like trauma or whatever, doesn't there have to be like evil that occurs to produce the trauma? So like, but there's no like speaking on morality, and then also like the punishments or like whatever, can that induce more trauma and like be counterproductive for clearing the planet?
But if the punishments are induced, they believe that their sins are the ones that caused it. Like their traumas are the ones that caused it. It wasn't David Miscavige who physically attacked Mike Rinder.
But there's no like.
It's Mike Rinder's fault for him attacking him.
But there's no speaking on like morality in general as to like where
No,
the
they get to
engrams come
decide
from.
what's. Each person gets to decide what's good and what's evil. Eli.
So how do you think this like applies to us today, like at Purdue?
That's a that's a great question because there is no Church of Scientology in Indiana. I looked it up. The closest ones are in Chicago. We did something right, guys. Guys, that got most of Anyway, so in all honesty, it really doesn't affect like, well, it could in the future affect our being here. Right now, it doesn't. Praise the Lord. But also the fact that like just in general, if you do encounter somebody who's a Scientologist, like let's say you go to Los Angeles like I did and encounter a Scientologist, like what do you say to them? Hopefully you wouldn't. And hopefully the ripping it up and throwing it away and not saying a word would be sufficient enough. But they're also super pushy. I think just like educating on things that we don't know about necessarily, because I feel like this is like super interesting and people get into it because it's so wacky. And that has the potential to suck people in. So I'm telling you all the bad things so you don't get sucked in, so you don't have to do this research. Yes, Laura?
I think another thing that is important is that there's a lot of shame that comes with people when they leave the church because they feel like they've been duped. And also it takes away their faith when they leave the church. So for us to know as Christians how to like what these people believed, how they got duped, and to know that it's not necessarily their fault, like a lot of people have fallen for it, like it's good to understand.
And if we go up to somebody who says, hey, I'm an ex-Scientologist, we go, oh, you were in that cult, and then we don't, and then we go ahead and talk about like, oh, there's a God that loves you, like, there's a huge disconnect right there because, like Laura said, they just got conned out of millions of dollars. Why would they believe in this other thing now? Leah Remini is actually Catholic, and it took her a long time to get to that point where she could like accept another religion. But she's a Catholic, which is pretty cool. So there's that. She's at least getting somewhere. Yes, Aaron.
So if a Scientologist was in a room with a Jehovah's Witness, you would be convinced.
Does anybody have any better questions? Actually, Allison had a question. Sorry. Allison.
I was going to ask, do you think Hubbard and or Miss Cabbage actually believes this, or do you think they're just running it in the light?
No, I don't think. I know David Miscavige does not believe. He started out, he was a Sea Org member, but I think because he got this power trip, like he made it less about like the Dianetics part, and he made it more about, oh, how can I have the most power? So I know for sure. L. Ron Hubbard, I don't think he really believed it. I think he was just trying to make, he said, he had that whole quote about making $1 million. I don't think he actually believed it. Yes, Rowdy.
I mean, what's the name? Xenu.
Yep.
You said the e-meter is used in the auditing process to identify the engrams. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes.
Has anybody ever stolen an e-meter to see what it actually registers?
I would like to do that. I believe so. It actually does not track anything. It just randomly moves. So they just ask you. The auditing session's over when the needle moves to a certain point where they're trained on like, oh, this is fine now. And it just so happens that it usually happens after the last question is asked.
Whoa.
Coincidence?
I think not.
Conspiracy. There's a whole lot of conspiracy in here, guys. Like, yes.
How far did Tom Cruise get in the process?
I actually don't know.
He's gotten a medal.
But yeah, I do know that.
In Scientology?
Yeah.
I didn't even know they gave out medals, but Tom Cruise has one.
For Tom Cruise, they will.
Maybe he asked for it.
Tom Cruise is the spokesperson for Scientology, by the way. Like, if you ask anybody everybody said Tom Cruise when I was telling them about Scientology, so I don't even need to say that. Yeah.
But he actually believes it.
He believes it because he only sees the good. He only sees the good parts. He doesn't see like everything that happens. He's not a high-ranking member of the Sea Org. He never had to join the Sea Org. He just gets this celebrity treatment because he's famous.
I can't remember all his wives. Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman
Katie
was
Holmes.
one.
Yeah.
But she got out of. She didn't join part of that.
She didn't. That's why she left. That's why they got divorced.
Who was it? There was another one too. Another wife.
Who was it?
I don't know, but I do know that he was told to get away from Nicole Kidman because she wouldn't convert.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So many questions.
There's a movie that kind of puts it into. I was trying to find it.
Going Clear?
No, it's the one with Will Smith and his son about Earth.
After yeah.
That movie is, although Will Smith is would not claim to be a part of Scientology,
He's dabbled in Scientology.
The premise of the movie, as far as to separate your emotions from your being, is a practice of Scientology. So it's like how we put this into a movie form, and so that movie.
I have tons of resources if you guys are interested that are non-Scientology based.
Oh, she got cruising.
All right.
Great job.